There's a special kind of injustice that burns you from the inside out. It starts small, something you might brush off, but it quickly turns into an all-consuming fire that makes you question everything about human nature. That's exactly what happened when Karen, from the HOA, decided to drain my water tank. But here's the twist. She had no idea it wasn't just my water tank. It was the one that fed her entire street. The first time I noticed, it was subtle. Just a drop in the water pressure. Like a faint whisper saying, something's off. But when it happened again, and again, I realized it wasn't just my plumbing acting up. No, Karen was up to something. Something far worse than a mere neighborly nuisance. I'm no stranger to fights, but this wasn't a petty squabble. This was a calculated act of entitlement. And the best part? She had no clue what was coming her way. By the end of this story, you'll see why karma isn't just a buzzword, it's a force of nature. But like every good tale, there's a twist coming. One that even Karen wouldn't have predicted. Stick around, because I wasn't just going to sit back and watch her drain me dry. It all started on a quiet Monday morning. Or so I thought. I'd just moved into a charming little suburban neighborhood. One of those places where everyone knows your name, even if you didn't ask them to. The HOA president, Karen. Well, she knew everyone's name. And then some. Let's just say she knew how to make her presence felt. She was always around, always watching, like a hawk circling its prey. At first, I thought she was just an overzealous neighbor, keeping the peace in the community. But that was before she knocked on my door, clipboard in hand, with the coldest smile I've ever seen. Just a friendly reminder, she said, her eyes scanning my yard like I had committed some unspeakable crime. The HOA has strict rules about water usage. It's part of the sustainability initiative. At first, I didn't think much of it. After all, water usage wasn't something that ever crossed my mind. But that's when I started noticing it. Whenever I checked my water tank, it was lower than it should have been. And here's the kicker. It wasn't just my water supply that was going down. It was everyone's. Little by little, Karen's casual comments turned into subtle threats. She'd say things like, "I've heard your water tank is underperforming. Maybe you should look into it." And every time I'd have the tank refilled, it would drop again. That's odd, I thought. The neighbors are all using their water, but it's only my tank that's getting drained. But I wasn't one to jump to conclusions. Yet that little voice in my head started to grow louder. That was just the beginning. The first real sign that something was seriously wrong came one Thursday evening. My water tank was nearly empty, and I had just filled it 2 days ago. I felt like I was being watched. Karen's watchful eyes were always around the corner, and the weirdest part? The water pressure in my house was getting weaker, as if someone was tapping into it from outside. I decided to check my meter, and sure enough, it was running faster than it should. I called the plumber. He came out, scratched his head, and said, "This doesn't make sense. It's like someone is siphoning off your water." That's when I knew I wasn't crazy. But I had no proof. And with Karen's power in the HOA, who would believe me? A few days later, the HOA slapped me with a fine for excessive water consumption. I was confused. I had never received a warning, never seen any issue with my usage until now. But it didn't stop there. Karen then sent me a letter about how my irresponsible water management was affecting the entire community's resources. Then came the threats. "You know," Karen said one afternoon, looking at me like a schoolyard bully, "you might want to think about the bigger picture here. You don't want to end up with a lien on your property." I had had enough. I started watching my tank more closely, but it felt like there were more people than just Karen involved. Every time I checked, there was a drop in water levels. But there was no evidence. It wasn't until I started comparing notes with neighbors that the full horror of what was happening became clear. Karen had been draining my water tank for weeks, but it wasn't just for her house. It turned out she had rigged the system, secretly connecting my water tank to her entire street. The audacity of it. She had made herself a little kingpin, and I was the unwitting pawn in her scheme. At first, I tried to confront her, but she just shrugged it off with a smile and said, "It's for the community, dear." Community? I scoffed. This wasn't community. This was exploitation. So, I started planning. I had a few things going for me. First, Karen underestimated me. She thought I was just a quiet neighbor who wouldn't fight back. Second, I had a little bit of time on my hands. And third, I knew exactly where to hit her. The HOA. The first part of my plan was simple. I started documenting everything. Every drop in water, every time my meter spiked. I installed cameras around my tank, making sure I caught any activity. I also started collecting statements from the neighbors. They had no idea what Karen was doing, but once they realized, they were all in. As I gathered evidence, I slowly began to execute the second phase of my plan, playing the long game. I started talking to other HOA members. Karen may have thought she was untouchable, but she had made too many enemies in the community. I sent out anonymous letters to other homeowners about the discrepancies with the water system. Slowly but surely, I turned the tide. One night, as I sat at my desk with all the data laid out before me, I felt a calm confidence wash over me. I wasn't just going to expose Karen. I was going to make her wish she'd never messed with me. It was time to turn the tables. It all came to a head at the next HOA meeting. The tension was palpable. Karen sat smugly at the head of the table, but I could see the cracks in her armor. "I've collected evidence," I said, standing up. "And I have the proof that Karen has been illegally draining my water tank and distributing it to this entire street." The room was silent. I pulled out the photos, the video footage, and the signed statements from my neighbors. I watched as Karen's face went from smug to pale. The room erupted into murmurs. "What do you have to say for yourself, Karen?" I asked, the words slicing through the air like a blade. There was no defense. Karen tried to deflect, to lie, but the evidence was irrefutable. The HOA voted unanimously to remove her as president and impose a fine on her for her actions. It was a glorious moment, the taste of justice sweeter than any victory I'd ever known. In the end, Karen got exactly what she deserved. Not only was she removed from the HOA, but she also had to pay restitution to the neighbors she had exploited. And for me, well, the water tank issue was resolved. But it wasn't just about water. It was about standing up against unfairness, against people who think they can take advantage of others without consequence. The takeaway here is simple. Don't let people walk all over you. If something doesn't feel right, trust your instincts. And when life gives you a Karen, give them a dose of justice they'll never forget. So, what would you have done? Would you have stayed quiet? Or would you have fought back like I did? Comment below with your thoughts. And if you made it to the end, comment, "Justice served." Let's see who's really been paying attention. And remember, next time someone tries to mess with your water, don't just watch the tank drain, fight back.